folks. I'm Will Lombardi, and I'm here in Quincy at the Capitol Arts Gallery in the Plumas Arts office in downtown Quincy with Tina Thorman. Tina is the featured artist for September here at the gallery. My first question, Tina, first of all, this is exciting. I'm glad you're here.
I am excited.
How did the opening go on Friday?
It was more than I hoped for. I was excited to see how many people came, and then with COVID and the wildfire and everything else, I knew there were a lot of people who couldn't come, and they were with me in spirit, sent their well wishes, so I had a lot of support.
Yeah, I was sorry that I myself wasn't able to get into town in time for it. But I spoke with you briefly afterwards, and it sounded like there was a good crowd, like you sold a couple pieces.
Did, yes.
And that it just felt good to be together and to have your art showcase.
Especially for my first show.
This is your first show.
It is, yeah.
That's so wonderful. And Tina, I know you as Trixie Hollyhocks.
A lot of people do.
Largely from social media.
Yes.
We hadn't really met until last week, officially. And so maybe I wanted to start there. This is your first show. This is your first gallery showing. And yet so much of your artwork is large pieces. And we see them around town if we know what we're looking for. So can you, give us a little biographical information? Where are you from? How long have you been here, etc. And then I'd love to sort of transition into, I think, maybe a bit of a craft talk about where you're coming from. And how you arrived there and where you think you're headed.
Okay. So we're from the Sacramento area, and we moved up here in 2015 when my husband got a job with the county as an engineer. So we had never been to Quincy before, never been to Plumas County, didn't really know a whole lot about it except what we heard in the news once in a while, and loved it. So it was a good move for us and our family, and we've been up here since 2015, and I homeschool our children, and we have just been doing our thing and became involved with the West End Theater Drama Works program, and the boys were both in the Magic Beanstalk Players. And so down in Sacramento, I had been teaching after school art classes. I was a first grade teacher before that. And then taught after school art classes and after school engineering classes down there. And when we moved up here, I still felt like I wanted to do some of that. So when the boys were in Magic Beanstalk Players, I became involved there doing some teaching of art and set design. And then I started painting their sets, and then I started painting the community theater sets. And so it kind of exploded from there, and it was quite an adventure. So by the time, right before COVID hit, we had just finished A Christmas Carol, the musical, with the Drama Works program, and I had painted 15 set panels, 4x8 set panels very quickly. And I thought, if these panels could be painted this fast, I could probably paint a canvas in a couple seconds. So when COVID hit and we were all shut down, I had a lot of time at home where I just started painting some canvases, and people became interested, and when I would post the pictures on social media. And then from there, I got the first big mural job up on Quincy LaPorte Road on a shed up there, and then from there everything just exploded. So
I'm fascinated by this. I'm fascinated by, well, to be clear, you had an art background. You were painting prior to doing the Beanstalk work.
I was at home, just, the kids' rooms needed painting, we would do a mural on their wall or something, or just, and then when I was teaching the after-school program, it was art, it was directed drawing classes for kids after school. And then I became involved with that, developing their curriculum and doing some of the artwork that would be taught by the whole program. So that was kind of where the
But
painting
the impetus
came.
for particularly these large scale pieces that you've been producing is from your background in the theater.
Yes, yeah, that's what got me going on the big stuff. And I had to learn how to do a lot of very detailed, realistic, as much realism as possible to give the audience the idea that that really was a city street in London, Dickens London scene. So with the shop windows with the hats in it and everything. So trying to figure, learning that as I went, I think is where I developed more of that realistic look.
Sure. And so I guess then research plays a large part in the work that you're doing now, or was that simply then for the stage sets?
Depends as far as research, as far as how to make it look realistic.
Yeah, because I do feel like realism plays, perhaps we'll have to make an adjustment as we talk through some of the paintings on the wall here, but I do feel like from what I've seen, realistic portrayal of places and things matters in the work that you're doing. And I wonder if this is something that compels you to do some research ahead of time. I wonder how much that's driven by your clients' tastes and interests.
Yes. So with the theater, yes, it was definitely looking at photograph references and figuring out what just the whole era. What are the colors? What is the style? What are the lines of perspective that create that depth into something to give that idea? Say, just using the city street idea, a cobblestone walkway, the lines are what make that look like you're actually looking into, even though it's a flat panel, that you look like you could walk on that cobblestone path. So as far as the murals that I create, it does depend on the client. I've had, for instance, someone wanted a depiction of Mount Shasta, as close as I could possibly get it. And just looking at a photograph and painting it huge was going to be difficult. So I actually used a grid system. So I took an actual photograph of the viewpoint she wanted, gridded it, and then did that grid on the wall and just followed it as closely as I could. It still ended up a little bit on the magical side because I just can't help it. But so then that's where some people have said that the style seems more like magical realism. So I do have a little touch in there, even though I try and get as realistic as possible.
Right, I hear you. So is talking about murals the right place then to start when we talk about your artwork?
Sure.
I suppose that I started there simply because that's, as I say, how I know your work.
Right.
And some of the things that I was wondering, for example, are you're doing walls inside, you're doing walls outside. What was the learning curve for you?
It was pretty steep at the beginning. Yeah. Well, and with the theater, I think helped because I learned how to use different sorts of paints. So instead of just your artistic acrylics, you're using house paint, and at the theater, whatever you can get for free is what you use. So sometimes there was a mixture of exterior and interior and mixing colors because you didn't have quite the right color, and just getting really creative with that, I think helped me learn that aspect of it. As far as large scale, I actually find it's easier to paint a large scale picture than it is something small somehow. I'm not quite sure how that works out, but for me it's easier to make something big than it is to do something tiny with a lot of detail.
And I suppose my question also has to do with context, like maybe the difference between public and private, but also something as simple as the weather.
Yes. Yeah, so I do definitely have a mural season for the outdoor murals, especially up here. It's a little shorter than, say, down in Sacramento or, other locations. But I do have to, especially even in the summer, I have to do it at a certain time of the day because the paints dry out so quickly as the heat, goes up and the humidity goes down after the sun comes up. So the ideal hours are in the morning, those kinds of things that I've learned over time. What types of paints, and a lot of it is primer. So depending on the surface, I've worked on so many different surfaces: metal, stucco, orange peel stucco, and wood and aged wood, and there's so many things that prep is all. That's what I've had to research the most, is the prep work that goes into getting a surface ready for a mural.
Yeah.
It's just as much work as the mural itself.
Yeah, and so again, I feel like maybe it's the wrong word, but circling back to research, to doing your homework, right?
Yes.
Because there's not only the time of day, as you mentioned, there's not only the materials that you're covering, but I'm also wondering about, the longevity
Yes.
of these, which I assume you are, thinking about.
Yes, and I am very lucky to have experienced muralists give me some input as I started.
Did you seek them out?
I did, because when things started looking like this was going to be something big, I decided, because the first mural was amazing, and then but I had no idea where it was going to go, and then more and more just kept piling in, and I thought I need to really do some more to figure this out. So I got to talk to Rafael Blanco, so he was very helpful to me, and I was fortunate that he would.
Did you do any work with?
I haven't even met him in person.
Oh,
I've
no.
only spoken to him on the phone and messaged back and forth. So, when I knew this was what I was going to do, I also reached out to a Canadian muralist who's doing amazing things up there, and so I talked to several like that have been doing this, the big ones, the great big buildings, just to kind of get an idea of what to do, what kind of surfaces, what kind of sealants, if any. And every muralist has a different idea. So I've just kind of had to try and find, take advice from this person and kind of make it my own.
Sure, I love that. I want to think about you as a fine artist. More so, and I don't know if this is the case, but I don't know if this conversation is leading us into, you're a commercial artist, this is what you do, versus you're a fine artist who is doing mural work commercially, thankfully, right?
Yes.
But also has pieces in a gallery. What is talk to me about your perception of what you're doing, or your positionality in that regard, right? You're a successful commercial artist. Yet you're using these fine art techniques. How do you feel?
Very, very fortunate that I get to do this. Sometimes I have to pinch myself that I get to. It wasn't something I set out to do. It wasn't something that I said, I am going to be an artist someday, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to make murals and sell paintings. That wasn't my goal. It kind of happened and landed in my lap, and I just decided this was something I love, and the response has been amazing and so validating. And as an artist, you just have so many ideas, and my time before this was spent focusing on other things, and then to be able to take all those crazy and wonderful and beautiful ideas and share them was just, I wasn't expecting to be able to. So, and then to be able to have multiple, venues, I guess you could say, being able to do that commercially through murals and private murals, and then to be able to do, and then that kind of went to mural squares, which would, the bigger squares, and then to go to canvas. And then, you find there is a different process for each one. So a canvas painting, and that's why sometimes people ask me the price difference. And that's another thing too. That's where you're just like trying to price your artwork, trying to price your love is difficult. But it's a different process on canvas than it is on a piece of wood or on the side of a building. So, and then you are also expressing, the ones that I do out of my head, I'm expressing something. And then the ones that are murals or commissions, I'm doing what they want and still trying to put myself in that, but give them what they want at the same time.
Sure. Do you have a studio that you work from at home?
I do. I'm so lucky. For the longest time, I worked out of our house, and it got really bad. I was working on big things like 9-foot longboards and big 48-inch round saw blades, and they were taking up our whole house, and you couldn't really walk. And then I got a larger easel that barely fit in the corner of the living room. So I was very fortunate that a little cottage near our house opened up that I could rent, and that's my art studio.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And what do? Walk to the studio
I do.
every morning?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so idyllic.
It is.
I'm already jealous.
Sorry.
And so is your work day, are you going to the studio with intent? Does the work that you do there, is it leading towards some of these larger commercial pieces, or do you set aside time to do some of these smaller pieces for yourself? Are you working in the morning, or are you just stealing time when you can?
I do have, it is work. As much as I don't like to say that, because it kind of feels like it takes some of the magic out of it, but I go in and there's paperwork to do, taxes, scheduling. I have a big wall calendar, and I try and get as much in as I can on my own pieces, but commissions have been coming in pretty steadily. So a lot of times I'm pushing the commissions, and then I try and almost like reward myself for every commission I do one of my own. So, yeah.
That's nice.
try. I don't always get there, but for the most part. And then when it's a mural, that's my touch base there, get my supply. I keep all my stuff there, so it's just nice to have that place out of our house where all my paints are stored, and I can go by there and pick them all up before I head out to a mural. So.
And is that in the morning? Are you more creative in the morning, or are you one of these stay up all night painting?
I've been doing that lately. It's kind of whenever I'm not at the house, that's where I am. So I try and get some done first thing in the morning, and then my most productive time is in the evening after dinner.
So you're saying that you're going for every commissioned piece of work, you do one for yourself.
I try.
You try.
Yes.
So do you find some sort of crossover between those two things? Is your work inspiring what ends up in the commissioned piece in some way? Or is the commission piece, do you get an idea and say, oh, I want to do this for myself? Are you working out techniques?
That's a good question. I don't know about, I think they all just kind of meld together. I don't know how to describe that. It's just kind of I do notice that when I'm working on the commissions that my own pieces go faster, because you're just, it's that efficiency thing. I am putting myself in there and using fewer brush strokes the more I go. So I feel like it kind of helps that way. I have found that sometimes I've gotten so involved with the commissions that when it's time to paint something of my own, I don't even know what to paint. I need somebody to tell me what to paint.
Yeah, no, I find that fascinating because we're going to get to speak to different pieces that are hung on the wall here separately. But that does sort of resonate with me.
Yeah.
You know, is where does the impulse come from?
And sometimes something will just come to me, or sometimes it sounds weird, but they'll come to me in a dream, and then I'll just wake up. And there are a couple that were like that, so those are special, and I definitely try. And then it's a matter of, okay, I gotta do it now, and then think, no, I've got to do these other things first. So it's kind of I'm still finding a balance actually myself. Because it's been a little over a year now that I've been doing this. And, I did the first mural in July of last year. So it's all
so recent.
It is. It kind of exploded.
Well, so was it hard then to pick pieces for this show? Did you have to make some hard choices, or did you have some real favorites that you knew you wanted to put out there?
No, I didn't have any trouble picking. I went ahead and put in, well, I'll tell you the truth. This is all of it right now because we were on close to the advisory evacuation stage, and I have to get it all out of the house.
What strange times, right?
Most everything is here. So no problem picking it up.
Well, this is wonderful, and I'm excited to talk about these individual pieces, and it's interesting to see this other side of you. And we got to talk about the origin of your work, and we've gotten to speak about your process and your bigger commercial projects. Is there anything that I've overlooked, or anything that you want to point to or discuss further in this regard?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a hard question to ask,
I think
right?
you were pretty thorough.
Well, hopefully what we'll do is we'll look at a few of these pieces, and you'll have an opportunity to speak a bit more about individuals. If you haven't been down here yet this September, put it on your list to come down while Tina's work is on the wall here at the Capitol Gallery. So we're looking at some of the smaller pieces now, Tina, and we're standing in front of these three: Azura Ferno, Hope and Wonder, and Sharing Light. And they're the three that have the more fantastical elements. And we spoke briefly about these as part of a larger series. And I just wonder if you can give us a bit of background on them, and thematically, what are they doing?
So these three were part of 6 originally that I did during the lockdown, and at the time that I actually painted each one, it was more just, I thought I just wanted to explore the whole fantasy world and paint a unicorn and a dragon, and I used, part of what I do is when I'm hiking or something in the woods, I imagine things. So I am looking around thinking, wouldn't it be so cool if a unicorn was coming out of the mist on this hike? And so those kinds of things translated. This is actually based on rocks that are a rock formation that's up on near Beckworth Peak, and this is actually part of the Cascade Trail hike near the spot where the water comes down all the time, and the ferns and the moss. So those were the bases that I thought as I was painting them. But then after I painted all of the fantasy series and had them leaned out on the mantelpiece, I was sitting there looking at them, and each one, it occurred to me, represents something that I was feeling at a time during the first part of the COVID lockdown. And so Azura Fernos, you can imagine a mother dragon protecting her lair, so to speak, staying home with the kids and making sure everybody was safe, and having an essential worker that was going back and forth from the house to, just feeling really protective. And then hope and wonder kind of came a little later in COVID, where you start feeling like, well, maybe things will get better and we'll get back to normal, and wouldn't that be wonderful to how would you feel if you saw a unicorn in the forest? You think, oh, hope and wonder. And then sharing the light was probably the most symbolic for me, because I was missing people so much. I missed them so much, and I'm kind of an introvert but a social person at the same time. So I was really having a hard time doing all of the communication long distance and Zoom and phone calls. And so that one is more, you can't be close to each other. You can't really touch, but you can share the light with each other from a slight distance. So
that's powerful. That's powerful, right? I know that my own relationship with the natural world under COVID conditions has become that more precious to me, and in that way perhaps more marvelous. And it seems like that's what you're capturing here. And
I didn't actually realize that until I saw them all laid out together. And I thought,
what was that moment like for you?
It was enlightening for myself. It was one of the first times I realized that art was really, I was able to express myself even more than I even knew through my art. And it's not just painting a pretty picture. You're not just painting a pretty scene. You're actually saying something with your art and exposing what you feel.
Really powerful. These are wonderful. Thanks.
Thanks.
So now, Tina, we're looking at a piece that you've named Renewal, and it has a bit of the fantastic that we saw in those smaller pieces, but this is the largest piece in the show. It looks like it's 3 feet by 5 feet, and you've filled it up with lots of detail. And I just wonder, obviously it's more than some of these others that are depicting scenes. I feel like this is telling a story. Is it possible for you to talk us through this piece, and if you'd like, direct us toward any of the features or details?
This one is directly related to the Dixie Fire and watching the destruction and feeling hopeless and feeling so much pain for everybody around us that is suffering. And I had an idea. This was actually something in a conversation with a friend that, talking about going forward and what that could look like. I have to say, before I even go here, I almost didn't put this one in the show. It felt so personal and so out there that I almost chickened out. So then I decided to just go for it, and I'm glad I did. So, because it's gotten a good response. But looking at the footage and driving around and seeing the destruction that was happening just feels so overwhelming, but knowing that there is hope for life. We went through some hiking areas from last year before the forest closed down that had been damaged by the North Complex fire, and there were so many signs of life and hope a year later that I thought, okay, I'm hoping that we as a community can work together to bring change to this area, because so much of it has been devastated this year. So the butterfly is a representation of time, metamorphosis, change, looking forward, and the fact that it is the shape of a monarch but not monarch colors kind of points to thinking out of the box in the future, making changes going forward, and then that hint of the magical element. The color coming off could be viewed as paint or not paint. It could just be magical color or just change, basically. And everywhere the butterfly has been, the landscape is changing back to its glory, and eventually, hopefully, we'll get there. Everywhere that the color has touched, there is a touch of color in the scene, including our antlered friend over there, whose antlers are teal because he's been touched by what the butterfly represents. So he's kind of like all of us watching this happen, and we're all touched by the change. And the water bringing life to everything, and then the magic that the butterfly brings, changing the color of the water, kind of represents that as well.
It seems like living in the times of COVID and smoke has had a real impact on your work, and it does seem to me like you're thinking your way into your pieces in some pretty powerful ways. Does that strike you? It sounds like as you're creating?
Not necessarily as I'm creating. Most of the time it's not a purposeful thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it'll just happen.
Mm-hmm.
But this one was purposeful. I purposely picked certain things to represent certain things in this particular piece. So this one was definitely different than what I normally do.
Powerful stuff.
Thank you.
So Tina, we're looking at one last piece, and it's a very different piece, and as you said earlier, it sort of speaks to your theater origins, and you said it's one of your favorites. So I thought we'd end here. Will you tell us about this piece?
So this dresser, there is another version of this dresser in my son's room. When he did a steampunk theme in his room, I looked up ideas on how to do steampunk dressers, and the ideas were all over the internet of how to make them look like, or how to actually use real luggage, and then some how to make the dressers look like luggage. So I did one for him, and people really responded to it. So I did this one as a secondary one, and it was one that, my experience with the theater helped, because trying to get that realistic, it kind of looks like a dresser. It looks like stacked luggage, and just the shading and the shadowing, and then using some certain elements that are actual real buckles and such to kind of give it that extra depth and interest.
It's really fun, and from the stickers to the realism, there's a lot less magic and more realism in this, I feel.
A little, yeah. So this one was definitely a functional art sort of situation.
And how does that become different, right? You're accustomed to painting on walls, you're accustomed to painting on canvas. Now you're taking a thing that is still highly functional, but making it another thing.
Yeah, it wasn't too much different than an actual painting. It's all about light and shadow, honestly, to get that realistic look. Just adding the shading in the right place to make it look like there's actually a piece above that hangs over. And it's just a matter of paying attention to that detail.
And then there's the thing that you're transforming it into, and the thing itself. Do you get some pleasure out of that?
Oh, absolutely. I have wonderful people who collect these dressers for me and let me know, and I am able to get them from them. And my storage unit is kind of full of them on the side of the studio. I think I probably have I've lost count actually. I think I probably have about 12 dressers waiting to be transported.
Do you collect other items as well?
Not so much collect those. Those usually end up coming to me, the saw blades and
sure.
Cow skulls and things like that. I don't actively collect those. The dressers are about the most common, just because I just love this idea.
Well, this is fun, and this has been fun. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
All right.